Welcome to Navigate STL School of Podcast. I am sitting here with Julius B Anthony of the St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature. Julius, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. So we start off every episode the same. Tell me about your personal K 12 story.
Sure. First, let me say thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here with you. I'm a product of St. Louis Public Schools, grew up in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood, attended Dunbar Elementary School. Excited about that. Um, and I grew up in a community that was predominantly black, 63106, and that neighborhood was filled with a lot of people who were part of that southern black migration. And so a lot of those older people, a lot of the parents during that period migrated from the South. And they came to St. Louis looking for a better day. They were either migrants themselves or they were second generation. Their parents were migrants. And they came to make sure that their kids had a good education as well. So I went to Dunbar. From Dunbar, I went to Metro High School. Now, what was interesting about that transition, Vashon High School was the feeder high school for my school. And I came up during a period where you went from kindergarten to eighth grade in the same school. So there was no such thing as a middle school system in our community. And so by the time I hit eighth grade, we only had so many sort of like options for high school. And magnet schools were sort of like a new concept in the St. Louis public school system. And I didn't really know, in our community, we didn't know a lot about the whole magnet school system. So we had a substitute teacher, interestingly enough, who told us about Metro High School. The only magnet school I knew about was Visual Performing Arts High School. I did not want to go to Vashon. And I was going to do everything in my power not to go to Vashon. Now, why? It was because I was the smart kid. And when you're the smart kid in certain kind of school settings, you're normally not the popular kid. And I didn't want to go to school with the same kids that I was going to school with at Dunbar. I'm just going to be honest with you. I had lots of friends there, but didn't want to go on to high school with them at Vashon. So I said my pathway out of that experience was going to be visual and performing arts.
Okay.
So this substitute teacher told us about this wonderful place called Metro where all these smart kids went. It was like utopia. And so when our teacher came back off of whatever that break that she had, I told her about Metro. And I was like, you got to find out more about how we can go to Metro High School. So she did that. And she contacted Metro High School, contacted the principal there, and then the administrators there said that they didn't believe that anybody at Dunbar Elementary School would make it at a school like Metro.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was their first response. And, because why? Because 63106 is one of those forgotten communities. It's one of those communities where they believe that everybody in that community is high risk, right?
Yeah.
It's at risk. You have all of those high needs, Most of the kids they consider uneducable. They have the highest rates of things around health and wellness. We just had this Ferguson report, and the Ferguson report says most of the people in that community have high health issues, and that's been generational. So our teacher fought for us, and so they basically said at Metro, well, we'll only talk to those students who have certain test scores, and at that time we were taking the Iowa Basic Skills Test, so there was no MAP test then. And there were about 8 families, 8 of us, 8 students who were eligible based on the testing scores.
Yeah.
They talked to those 8 families. Three of us actually had to take a test. We got into Metro. Only 2 of us was able to attend Metro, myself and another young lady. And by the end of the first semester, that young lady had to leave Metro because she got pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was sort of like my St. Louis education story. And it has impacted the work that I do today. Left Metro High School went on to Howard University, was the first graduate from Metro High School to attend a historically black college or university. Why is that the case? Because they didn't guide us to HBCUs.
I was going to say maybe they didn't allow the black students.
There
in,
you
but-
go. There you go. So it wasn't one of those things that they did at Metro at that time. You know, they basically, and at that time, most of us at Metro, when we basically were given interviews into the Ivy League schools. I had an interview with some alumni from Vassar College and was able to get into Vassar just off of an interview. I basically didn't apply. But I applied to Howard based on some friends of mine who at Metro who knew about HBCUs. And here's the thing, I have 7 siblings. Some of my older siblings had already attended historically black colleges and universities. My sister had attended Lane. I had some brothers that went to Southern University. And then I had some brothers, one of my brothers attended WashU. I was like number 7th in my family. So my parents had 8 kids, 4 at the top, 1 in the middle, 3 at the end. I was at the end. I was the 7th kid. And so I already had siblings that had gone on to college. And I know I'm making this story long,
no,
right?
it's
But this is my education story. And but I had never considered historically black colleges, even though some of my siblings had already gone to black colleges. And so my thinking wasn't really to go to a black college. So I had some friends at Metro who they knew about Howard. I applied because they applied. But when it was time for acceptance, I was the only one that had gotten accepted to Howard. But I wasn't going to go. My intention was to go to St. Louis U and stay home with my mom. Really, that was my goal, was to stay in St. Louis and not go away to school. But my mother was like, you're going to go away to college. My brothers, who had already had an experience at HBCUs, wanted me to attend an HBCU. And so I really went because they sort of made me, and my mother kind of pushed me out of the house. Best experience I've ever had in my life. To this day, I advocate for all black young people who graduate from high school to attend an HBCU when you have that opportunity, because it gives you a perspective of the world that I believe all young people need at that period in their lives. If you want to choose something different for your graduate studies, that's something else. But when you reach a certain level in your life, especially by the way that we're educated in K-12, black young people need the HBCU experience. So you didn't ask me that question, but I just want to put in a plug for that. And you can come back to that if you want to ask me that. And I'm giving all of this information to say that's my education story basically is my why, part of my why for why I do what I do. Why do I focus on black children's literature? Why is it important for me to do the things I do around schooling for black children? It is because of my own experiences in education. In K-12, I went to an all-black school. When I was at Metro High School, it was a mixed experience, but even in all of those experiences, we all experienced a sense of invisibility. And I'll ask you, did you experience a sense of invisibility? Now, what do we mean by that? In the curriculum and in the text, how often did you see yourself told in stories in school? How often did you see yourself in terms of images in school? How many books did you read in K-12 that told stories about you, your experiences, your past, your everyday life? That renders you invisible when you don't. And so because I had those experiences, and remember, I was the smart kid.
Yeah, me too. I know exactly what you're saying.
But my peers were not necessarily so. And I believe that they had some of the same abilities that I did. They just didn't have opportunities that I did. And I had opportunities because I had siblings who had already gone on to college. And because of that, I had experiences from them. Some of my peers didn't have that. I had a parent who was educated. My parents were avid readers and demonstrated that in the home. And so I had opportunities and experiences that a lot of my peers did not. But schooling did not give us anything to really push us toward literacy in the righteous way that it should. So that was my education story.
I have two, like, there are now two branches of the next question that I was going to ask. My first question, and I really want to get back to the whole, like, education HBCU experience, is that, well, before I even ask that, tell me about St. Louis Black authors and children's literature.
Sure. So, St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature, our mission essentially is to ensure that all children are confident and competent readers by the end of third grade. And so we follow this thought. The International Literacy Association has a core tenet, and that tenet is every child has a basic human right to read. We also know that based on research, that third grade reading is the marker that determines whether a child is successful in school. Mm-hmm. And there is a direct link to determine third grade reading success and a person's ability to thrive in life as an adult. If that is true, then in St. Louis, in the metropolitan area, Black third graders annually fail at a rate of 75% on the state mandated exam. Now think about that. 75% of Black third graders in metropolitan St. Louis annually fail the state mandated exam. Now, the research suggests that when you are on or above grade level in reading at the end of third grade, you do better in school and in life. Mm-hmm. That's 7 children out of 10. Every 10 that has the potential to not have a thriving adult life. What happens to those adults? Okay.
Honestly, if you look at the statistics between third grade reading, dropout rates, and incarceration in St. Louis, they follow the same trend.
The same trend. So, as a Black person, as a Black man, as a Black educator, I felt like it was my responsibility to do something about that. And that's why we created St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature. So all of our motivation, all of our intention is to do work to change that trajectory with intention. And so we have programs that we believe will change that reality for Black children and for Black people.
So leads me into my next question. Where do you find the inspiration in the stories that you tell? You mentioned that you grew up in a thriving first generation, second generation Black migrant community from the South. You talked about your experience at HBCUs. Where do you find the motivation and the like kind of catalyst for the stories that you tell?
Well, I didn't grow up in a thriving community. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a loving community, but it wasn't thriving. it was a loving community. And what I mean by thriving in the sense that most of the people in my community were basically poor. Yeah. There were working class people, and my parents were working class. My parents never owned their own home, but they sent 8 children to college. That was their intention. They wanted to make sure that their 8 children were educated, and they did that. But there was a lot of love in our community. And I think that helped to make sure that all of us in that community made it in some kind of way. Where do I get my inspiration? I get my inspiration from the people that loved me, from that source. I also get my inspiration from this knowing that I am the manifestation of that love, of that hope, and from the light and hope that came before the people that loved me. You see, this whole journey toward literacy and toward reading success, it didn't just begin today. It began actually on the plantation. It began when those Africans understood that what existed in those books in the big house translated into something that they believed was freedom
Mm-hmm.
and that they didn't have access to. A lot of them were beaten, whipped, and died over wanting to have access to those books. They also understood that there was this sense of having a real sense of communication, which is also part of the literacy process. Because you see, literacy isn't just reading
Mm-hmm.
and writing. Literacy is also the way that we communicate in terms of our speaking. It's also viewing, it's also listening.
And our ability to interpret a story.
Yeah, it's all of that. All of that began on the plantation. And there was this desire, there was this understanding from those Africans on that plantation that understood that you needed to have a full knowledge and knowing of all of that in order to truly be free, which is why they created their own language,
Mm-hmm.
which is why they created those songs, which is why they had those spirituals that helped them to get from the plantation to freedom. And so that also inspired them during the Jim Crow period, which is why they also was able to migrate from the South to those destination cities like Chicago, St. Louis, and Detroit. And so those things inspire me. And you know what else inspires me? Every time I see a black child that lights up when they get a book and they see a picture of someone that looks like themselves. Every time they get a book and they don't want to put it down, or every time a child goes into a Believe literacy lab that we create and they don't want to leave and go back to the classroom, I get inspired over that. Because then I know that we're doing really, truly something in order to ensure that that research becomes a reality, and that we're also bringing to real life that whole tenet around every child has a right to read.
So you asked me a question earlier, which was how often did I see myself in the literature in grade school. I will say that I have very intentional parents who like to buy black baby dolls and black books,
Mm-hmm.
but it was markedly not enough. I don't think that I had a full African American history class until I got into college, and so I guess my question for you is, well, it's kind of two parts. The first is when you're centering black children and black characters in your story, one, have you received pushback? But two, what was the point where you were like, this is gonna be the thing that we do that sets us apart from everybody else?
I have not received any pushback in terms of our work, um, other than conversations from larger book companies
Mm-hmm.
who have um, who have wanted relationships with our organization, um, and have asked me or have talked to me about this whole notion around multiculturalism. Now, in the whole education space, multiculturalism has always been the rule of the day to satisfy the diversity, equity, and inclusion checkbox.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that for black children in settings where there is a majority of black children is that that is not enough and it is not good enough. Because the multicultural experience in those settings still leave black children marginalized. Because multicultural curriculums in those settings still only give black children 3% of experiences about themselves. We're in such a nefarious situation. Black children in majority black settings need a majority of the text to reflect them in order for them to be successful in school,
Mm-hmm.
period. And so I don't apologize for saying that. I don't apologize for having the word black in the title of our organization. See, we don't have time to apologize right now. we're in a critical, nefarious situation. To me, it's unconscionable to consider that every year in St. Louis, 75% of black children are failing in reading. And then some people say, well, you know, the test is culturally biased. Go to any elementary school and put a book in front of those children and say, read. You think they'll read that book?
You know what? Honestly, I know that they'll know the words, but do I know that they'll read
They
it?
don't
that
know
they'll
the
know
words.
The context?
No, they don't know the words. Take it from me. No, they don't. A lot of them don't even know sight words. And so we can't even get into the cultural biasness of norm reference tests and standardized tests because the fact of the matter is they cannot read.
So you talked a little bit early on about kind of like slavery and this thirst for knowledge. Where do you believe that the divestment in literature or in reading happened? And I'm going to answer my own question because I understand 1,000% that it's strategic. But when you're creating these stories, is that kind of like that catalyst that you're hoping to revitalize that passion that students have?
So here is my philosophy. This is what I believe that all children need, but I believe that black children, brown children, indigenous children particularly need this. I call it the intimacy of literacy. There are three elements to the intimacy of literacy: interest, confidence, and joy. Now, what are those three things? Interest basically means that they have to have some kind of cultural connection to the story. They have to have some kind of background experience that connects them to the story, that makes them want to read it. That's interest. And we're particularly talking about children from kindergarten to third grade, because that's where you really get the beginning of the want for the reading process, okay? But I believe even kids in middle school need that as well. And we can talk about that in a whole different conversation because it's especially crucial at that age. By that time, they're gone. And we really need those strategies there. The whole piece around confidence means that, and we have research to support this. We can look at the research of James Comer. We can look at the research of Derek and Darlene Hobson. There are several black thought leaders who have done this research. When children have access and connection, consistent access and connection to black children's literature, they become more confident in themselves. They feel better about themselves. And they become more willing to participate in the learning process. They need to have confidence. You can talk to any teacher and they will tell you the children that walk into their classroom with confidence, even if they don't have the most ability, you can take a kid with confidence and you can do something with that confidence. So children need confidence, black children need confidence. The last thing is joy. We as teachers and adults have to make the learning how to read experience a joyful one. Too often as adults, we make the learning how to read experience a traumatic one. We make it one where kids don't really want to participate in the reading process. We make it one where we just like, huh? Who wants to do this? And that's not a child's issue. That's an adult issue.
Yeah.
And so we must have all three elements, and especially for black children. Now, why is this whole joyful thing, let's make the learning process a joyful one, important? It's because we're socialized in our home toward joy, right? And so in our home, in terms of cultural competency, and when I say our, I mean black people, we're socialized toward joy. Most of the day in our home are joyful experiences. You know, when our parents talk to us, or when they talk to their friends, or when they're on the phone, it's joyful. Our voices go up, it goes down, it has inflection. Typically, when we talk to our kids, it's up and down, even if we mad at them.
Yeah, they'll sing songs.
It's yes, it's joy in the room. In our church experiences, it's the same. At our barbecues, at our weddings. And so kids are socialized around movement and joy. But when we get into the school setting, what happens? A kid can't do anything unless an adult tells them to. Don't move until I say move. Don't open the book until I say open the book. Don't pick up the pencil until I say pick up the pencil. Don't open your mouth and make sound until I say make sound. What does that sound like to you?
Jail.
Prison. And so we're socializing them for something else in school than we are in the home. Am I right about that?
I would tend to agree that has been the history in a lot of classrooms. Yeah.
Okay. And so the joyful piece is crucial. We must connect the cultural things that we do at home around joy to the learning process we have at school. And so what St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature is trying to do is to try to connect those two things through our Believe Project. And our Believe Project does that.
Okay, so my next question is: you've highlighted kind of one of my essentially big issues with the current state of schools, that I don't think that a lot of schools are doing well at educating children for the environment that they are gonna like become adults in. They're educating people for a time that and careers that, in my opinion, no longer exist. And so, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are facing the education system, particularly when it comes to literacy and things like that?
It's the same challenge that has always faced the education system. One is race, and the other is seeing the humanity in children.
Mm-hmm.
There is no education success until that happens first. See, you got to love children. You got to see their humanity first before you can get to anything around learning. And that's an issue that has always faced American education. They've never seen the humanity in black children. And they've never truly loved black children. And that's why black children has never been successful in American education. There is no school in the American educational system that righteously educates them because we don't see their humanity. And so that challenge is the same as it was from day one as it is today.
So where are you guys pulling these themes from to inspire joy? So like, what are some of the like key themes that you would say are highlighted in your books?
It's not just our books, it's our program. So our core program is called the Believe Project.
Okay.
And so this is what the Believe Project, what we're doing is building what we call literacy labs in schools and community centers. It's a space in a school, a room, and in this room, at the core of the space is the literature, or books. We put at least 1,000 books in those spaces. At least 80 to 90% of those books are considered black children's literature, as we define it. And we define it as picture books or beginner chapter books where the protagonist is black, or the story tells stories about a black protagonist. In addition to that, the room is designed to look like someone's home. First, also let me say, all of the books are new. So these aren't borrowed books, so we're not asking people, oh, can you send us some books? No. We buy all new books for those spaces. That's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
We buy all new furniture and set up the space to look like someone's home. And so it's all adult-sized furniture. And again, we focus on kindergarten through third grade. Adult-sized couches, chairs, dining room sets, chandeliers from the ceilings, lighting, bookshelves. All of that is intentional. And we even try to make it look like a piece of art and beauty because we want our children to see that. And we focus on communities where children typically don't get to see spaces that look like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in these spaces are large size murals. So we take one full wall in that space and we do a mural where there are large characters of black children. We show the diversity among black children in terms of skin tone, hairstyles, and then we put all of these aspirational words. Of course, the word believe is in every mural, but we also do things like excel, soar, be inspired, because we want them to be able to have those kind of things always around them. We push in local authors and national authors, New York Times best-selling authors, to spend time with our children. Because for our kids and for all children, the author is like God to them. Because we tell them that all the knowledge is in the book, right? So if you're the person that wrote the book, to them, you're like God, because you're the person with all the knowledge. So we push in our authors. National authors are zoomed or virtually put into those spaces, and kids get copies. All of our children get free copies of those books, autographed copies of those books. We have relationships with some of the local theater companies, like Metro Theater Company.
Mm-hmm.
They will take a children's book and adapt it for a play or some kind of theatrical experience. Our kids will get to go see that. For a lot of our children, that's their first time seeing a live piece of theater. All of that is literacy, and they get a free copy of that book. And then we have all of these other type of literacy experiences, trying to do this thing called interest, confidence, and joy, building all of those pieces, hoping that the schools are doing the science of reading part. And I won't get into the detail about the science of the reading part. Then we train teachers to also help them to understand the importance of black children's literature. We have a partnership with 9 PBS,
Okay.
and we work with their program, the Ready to Learn program. And their Ready to Learn program is experiential. It has a lot of books that reflect black children and their experiences. One of the things that we help teachers in the schools to understand, that this is a yes space for children. So when children get into this space, it's not about being controlled. It's about children having freedom to choose their own books and to do what they want to do in that space. Why do we do that? That's intentional. We want them to build their own self-agency so that they could feel good about what they're doing in terms of choice. So what you do in this space, it looks like your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can make the psychological connection that what you do here, guess where else you can do it?
At
You
home.
can do it at home. We have a relationship with PBS where we buy PBS playtime pads. We put them in the space, and a lot of times when we get the funding, we give first graders PBS playtime pads for them to take home as their own, so they can have a 24-hour literacy experience that are loaded with ebooks, music, literacy games, all of those kinds of things as well. So we're doing all of these things to make sure that we change that trajectory around this whole black children not being able to be successful in reading, looking at black children's literature and black experience as a definitive strategy to ensure that black children become successful readers by the end of 3rd grade.
So, as parents are looking for a school to prepare their kids for kindergarten or for elementary, what are some of the key things that you think that they should be looking for, asking their administrators or teachers when it comes to how they're going to set their child up for success in reading?
Spend a day at the school. Can I spend a day here to see if this is a loving environment for my child? That's the first thing they should do. Spend a full day at that school, not a partial day. Spend an entire day at the school and ask yourself, is this a loving environment for my children, for my child, or children, because some of them might have more than one child.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them how many times do they hear someone screaming at a kid. And if I put my child here, do I want someone yelling at my child? Is this a loving environment for my kid? That's the first thing that they should do. Then they need to check the record, because it's free information. Find out where that school is in terms of its academics and third grade reading scores. That would be the second thing that I would ask. And then ask the school, challenge them. Why are the reading scores what they are? And ask them about their reading program. Then I would ask them how many black books are in their classrooms, K to 3. And if they have a Believe project. And if they don't have a Believe project, go check out stlblackauthors.com and get in contact with them. That's what I would ask them to do.
How many schools are you guys in?
Currently, we're in 6. We're in 6 schools. We'll open up our 7th one in September, Barack Obama in Normandy School District. We're excited about that. And possibly an 8th one in October in St. Louis Public Schools. So we're excited.
So as an organization, our goal is really to empower parents in their journey to find a school that's going to be the best fit for their children. We have our website, which does share the things like the third grade reading scores, academic growth, other academic test scores. We have things on there like discipline and school suspension, X, Y, and Z. What else could we be doing? What else should we be doing to help families, particularly families of color, particularly those in our target zip codes that are around North St. Louis City, to help them to kind of make sure that they're in a space to be able to take advantage of some of these resources or to inspire their children in these ways?
Sure. Let me say something about the social emotional piece with the Believe Project as well. One of the pieces of data that we've also learned from our time with the program, and we started our program in the fall of 2019. Mm-hmm. And the data that we've learned so far is that when children are scheduled, they have to spend at least 90 minutes a week in our spaces. When children are scheduled for their time or their day to go into those spaces, their behavior changes because they want to be in the space. And once they get into the space, they don't want to leave. And so we've seen a marked difference in terms of how children behave the day that they're scheduled for those spaces. And so for us, that's really important because a lot of children who were getting in trouble in school or were being identified for suspension, their suspension rates have gone down as a result of the Believe Project and them wanting to be in those spaces. So I just wanted to put that piece of data out there. We're still waiting to see how the literacy success part of it is, because we're still working on our efficacy study. But we're already getting great data around the social emotional piece. So I wanted to say that.
Okay, so what else could we be doing to support the families as they go through this process?
In terms of literacy?
And in terms of helping families understand the impact and to make sure that they're getting to the heart of these questions with their schools.
Sure. I think what's really important are 2 things. One, it's really important that parents understand that when the things that they can do at home, a lot of parents think that it's really important to sort of like do these sight cards and sight words and to get these books where they are doing these sort of like ditto sheets and things with their kids to make sure that they are readers. And I would encourage against that. The most important thing that parents can do to make sure that kids early on become great readers is to talk to them a lot. Understand that reading, becoming successful readers is lots of things. Lots of support. So we say that becoming really fully literate are 6 elements, listening, viewing, speaking, visual expression, reading, and writing. And so as a parent, if you can work on the speaking, the listening, and the visual expression pieces, those are major things that could really support a teacher in a classroom setting working on the science of reading pieces. So what do we mean by that? Having lots of conversation with children. Children who are very verbal and have great vocabulary, when they come into the classroom setting, that helps teachers when they're going through the science of reading process. The bigger the vocabulary the child has going into the classroom helps when it comes to reading. It also helps with imagination, which is what children need when they're learning how to read as well. And we start with the picture reading that helps with the imagination, but all of that comes from being verbal. So that's one of the big things that parents can do. The other thing that parents can do is to find Black children's literature, and it is available in our city. I See Me Bookstore in University City is a great place to find it. You can also get literature from us if you go to our website. We have great literature, stlblackauthors.com. You can get literature from us as well. Other things that parents can do in terms of if you're already in the school, what I would encourage parents to do is to find out where your child is in terms of readability levels. So what schools typically do is they do all of these diagnostics assessments on children. They do progress monitoring assessments, they do benchmark assessments, and then they do the summative with the MAP test. Find out where your child is, and then ask the school to explain to you what those scores are. And after they explain those scores, ask them to develop an IEP, an individual education plan, to ensure that your child moves from wherever that score is to a successful reading level. That's one of the most important things that you can do for your child. Don't just assume that your child is a reader. Make sure that the school does their job, that you know where your child is, and that there is a plan to ensure that they become a successful reader.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. This was an informative conversation. Where can people find you and find the work that you guys are doing?
stlblackauthors.com. That's where you can find us on our website. We're there. Get in contact with us there.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.